Hey guys, welcome back to NEXTGENBLOGGER, and in this video I want to show you the difference between timeline, dope sheet and graph editor. So timeline, dope sheet and graph editor are all motion editors, and I will be demonstrating the difference between all these three. So without further delay, let's get started. Now, as you can see, I've already opened up the Blender software, and let's first open up the timeline. So right here is the timeline. Now, in the timeline, what you can do is you can actually adjust the timing of your animation. And let's see this with the help of an example. So first, let me create a small animation. So I have already covered this in my previous videos, that if you want to activate all the transform actions, you need to press the letter I, and if you want to activate a specific transform action, you need to press the letter K. So by transform actions, I mean location, rotation and scale. And let's say I want to activate all the transform actions. So let me press the letter I on the keyboard. And as you can see, a keyframe has been added on the first frame. And if you look inside object properties, you will see that the location, rotation and scale transform actions are highlighted and active. Next, you need to move the cursor from the first frame, and let's place it somewhere around the 60th frame. Now let's move this cube from this position to this particular position right here. So to do that, first grab the cube by pressing the letter G, and now activate the y-axis by pressing the letter Y, and now move the cube along the y-axis like this. And once you're satisfied with the position of the cube, simply press enter on the keyboard. Now let's complete the animation by pressing the letter I on the keyboard once again, and this will insert a second keyframe on the 60th frame, thus completing the animation. So now if I actually play this entire animation, this is what is happening, as you can see. Now, one thing that I would like you to note is the value inside location y-axis. So initially, when the cursor is on the first frame, the value inside location y-axis is 0 meter. And when the animation ends and the cursor is on the 60th frame, the value inside location y-axis is 12.284 meter. So that means that the cube moved 12 meters on the right hand side from this position to this particular position. So I need you to make a mental note of this, because we will require this later on. Now, as I had said in the beginning, in the timeline, what you can do is you can adjust the timing of your animation. So if I play this animation, this cube is taking 60 frames to move from this position to this particular position right here, right? And if you want to make this cube move faster, what you need to do is you need to decrease the space between the first keyframe and the second keyframe in the timeline. So let's do that. So let me select this second keyframe and now grab it by pressing the letter G, and now move this second keyframe from the 60th frame to, let's say, somewhere around the 30th frame, and now press enter on the keyboard. And so now if I play the animation for you, as you can see, this time the cube is moving much faster. So I hope you understood what you can do in the timeline. All you can do in the timeline is you can adjust the timing of your animation. Right now we saw how you can make the cube move faster. You can also make the cube move slower. In that particular case, you need to select the second keyframe, grab it by pressing the letter G, and now move it and place it somewhere around the 90th frame. And now press enter on the keyboard. And so now if I play the animation, this time the cube is moving at a much slower pace. So this was all about the timeline. What you can do in the timeline is you can adjust the timing of your animation. Let's now look at the dope sheet. So let me create a new project. So let me press Ctrl N and let me select general, don't save. All right. Now to open up the dope sheet, what you need to do is you need to click on this animation menu which is present right here. And this is the dope sheet. So right now we don't need the camera window. So let me just move it on the left side, and this is the dope sheet. Now, what is the difference between timeline and dope sheet? Well, in the timeline, you can just adjust the timing of your animation. In the dope sheet, you can also adjust the timing of your animation, but you can actually move transform action specific axis in dope sheet. And what I mean by that is, let's just create an animation. So let's create the same animation that we created in the timeline. So let me press the letter I on the keyboard, and this will add a keyframe on the first frame. And inside object properties, as you can see, all the transform actions, that is location, rotation, and scale, they all are highlighted and active. Now let me move the cursor and place it somewhere around the 60th frame. And now let me move the cube from this position to this particular position. We already knew that, we already took a mental note that we move the cube by 12 meters on the right side along the y-axis. So I will do the same here also. So let me first of all grab the cube by pressing the letter G. And now let me activate the y-axis by pressing the letter Y. And now let me move the cube along the y-axis by 12 meters. The value does not need to be specific. You can place it somewhere around 12 meters. Perfect. And now let me press enter on the keyboard. And now let me once again press the letter I to complete the animation. So now if I play the animation for you, this is what is happening. This is the exact same thing that we did in the timeline. It's the same thing. Now let's do what we did in the timeline. So I want to make this cube move faster, right? So what do we need to do if we want to make the cube move faster? Well, we need to move the keyframe from 60th frame to 30th frame, right? This is what we did in the timeline. But in the dope sheet, what you get actually is transform action specific axis keyframe. And what that means is, if you expand this object transforms layer, you're going to find individual keyframes for each and every transform action axis. So for the X location or for the X axis of location, we have an individual keyframe. For the Y axis of location, we have an individual keyframe. For the Z axis of location, we have an individual keyframe. Similarly, for X axis of rotation, for Y axis of rotation, and for Z axis of rotation, we have individual keyframes. For X axis of scale, for Y axis of scale, and for Z axis of scale, we once again have individual keyframes. So what you get in the dope sheet is you get transform action specific axis keyframes. And while in the timeline, when you actually moved the keyframe from 60 to 30, you are basically moving all the keyframes which are there. So how many keyframes are there? There are in total 9 keyframes, right? Because we press the letter I, which means that all the 3 transform actions are active, and each transform action contains 3 axes, which means there are a total of 9 axes. So in the timeline, when you move the second keyframe from 60 to 30, all the 9 axes were moved from 60 to 30. But in the dope sheet, you can actually select the transform action specific axis that you want to move. So in this particular case, which axis do we want to move? That is the question. So the axis that we want to move is this one, the y-axis of location, because it is only in this particular axis that I did some animation, right? What I did, I selected the cube and moved it along the y-axis by 12 meters. That's it. I did not rotate this cube, neither did I scale this cube, right? So I just moved this cube along the y-axis by 12 meters. So the axis that I actually used for my animation is this one, y-axis of location. This is the only axis that I used for my animation. And so if I want to increase the speed of the movement of the cube from 0 to 12 meters, I can actually first select the y-axis of location, and I can actually select the second keyframe of the y-axis of location, grab it by pressing the letter G on the keyboard, and now move it and place it on the frame 30. And that's it. And so now if I play the animation for you, as you can see, once again, the cube is now moving much faster because it is taking only 30 frames instead of 60 frames as it was taking previously. But I hope you understood the difference between timeline and dope sheet. In the timeline, when we moved the second keyframe from 60 to 30, we were basically moving all the keyframes of all the 9 axes. We were basically moving the keyframes of all the 9 axes in timeline. In dope sheet, you actually can move the transform action axis specific keyframe. So I hope the difference is clear to you. Now let's look at the graph editor. So let me just create a new project once again. And now to access the graph editor, you need to click on the animation menu. Well, this is the dope sheet, which we already know. But to access the graph editor, you need to bring your cursor within the boundary of the dope sheet right here. And now you need to press Control Tab, and this will open up the graph editor. So this is the graph editor, right? And let's do the same animation that we did in the timeline as well as in the dope sheet. So let me first of all insert a keyframe by pressing the letter I. And by pressing I, we have activated all the transform actions. And if you look inside object properties, all the transform actions are highlighted and active. Now move the cursor from the first frame to, let's say, the 60th frame right here. And now let's move this cube from this position to this particular position, which is along the y-axis by 12 meters. So first grab the cube by pressing the letter G, and now activate the y-axis by pressing the letter Y, and now move the cube along the y-axis by 12 meters. So as you can see right here, Right. So as you can see, I have moved the cube along the y-axis by 12 meters. And let's complete the animation by pressing the letter I on the keyboard. And this will insert a second keyframe. But if you look right here, there are no keyframes. There is actually a line, and it's also not a line. It's actually a graph line, something sort of a graph line. So let me zoom out first of all so that you can see what is happening. Now, I know to your eye, nothing is visible. You're just seeing three lines. This is one line which is going upwards. This is the second line, and this is the third line. But believe me, there are actually 9 lines right here. Right? There are 9 lines. And these 9 lines represent the 9 axes. So 1 line, 2 line, 3 line, 4 line, 5 line, 6th line, 7th line, 8th line, 9th line. So if you expand the object transform, so in dope sheet we had individual keyframes for every axis. In the graph editor we actually have individual lines for every axis, and these lines kind of convert into this sort of graph if you change the value inside them. So what is the difference between the graph editor and timeline and dope sheet? Well, in the timeline, as I already said, you can only adjust the timing of the animation, and if you move keyframe, all the 9 keyframes gets moved. In the dope sheet, you can adjust the timing as well, but unlike timeline, in the dope sheet you get to move the transform action specific axis keyframe. In the graph editor, you can actually move the keyframe to adjust the timing, as well as you can actually change the values of the transform action. Now, I know it kind of looks complicated, but it is not actually. So let me just show you by doing something which we already did. So let's do what we did 2 times previously. So currently this cube is taking 60 frames to move from this position to this particular position. Let's make this cube move much faster. So what we did earlier, we moved the keyframes from 60 to 30, right? So let's do that right here as well. So you need to select this particular keyframe right here. So this is the main keyframe, right? This is the main keyframe. You need to click on it, and what you need to do next is, right at the top you're seeing a bunch of values. On the left side you're seeing a bunch of values. So on the top, the values that you see, they represent the frames. On the left hand side, the values that you see, they represent the actual values which are present in the transform action. So since I want to move this cube at a much faster pace, so currently it is taking 60 frames, I want to take 30 frames so that this cube will move much faster. So currently this keyframe is present at 60. So what I need to do is I need to move this keyframe from this position to somewhere around this particular position to make this cube move much faster. So to do that, you need to first of all select this keyframe, and now you need to grab it by pressing the letter G. And now you need to activate the x-axis. And the reason I say you need to activate the x-axis, because right at the top, the values that you see, they represent the time, and on the left hand side, the values that you see, they represent the actual values inside transform actions. And you can actually make a one-on-one graph in that particular way. So the values which are right at the top, it is kind of the x-axis, and the values which are on the left hand side, it is kind of the y-axis. So after selecting the keyframe and then pressing G to grab the keyframe, you need to press the letter X, and this will activate the x-axis. And now you can actually move the keyframe like this from 60 to 30, and now press enter on the keyboard. And so now if I play the animation for you, as you can see, this time the cube is moving much faster. It is taking 30 frames instead of 60 frames. And the way we did it is we moved this keyframe from 60 to 30. And I hope the one-on-one graph is clear. If not, let me just open up the paint, and let me show you something by drawing. So this is what is happening. This is the one-on-one graph. So this is the x-axis right about here, and this is the y-axis right about here. So what you need to do is you need to imagine the values which are present right at the top as x-axis. So let me just show you. Right. Now look at the values which are present right at the top. So this is kind of a flat line, right? This is a flat line. So you need to think of it as the x-axis. Like the x-axis is flat line, this particular flat line. And the values which are present on the left hand side, it is the y-axis. So this is a straight line. So this is a flat sleeping line. This is a straight line. So this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis. So this x-axis represents the time, right? This x-axis represents the time, and the y-axis represents the values which are present inside transform actions. So we are going to change the values as well, just so to make you understand what exactly that is. Now let's change the values. So what we were doing up till now is we were moving this cube from this position to this position, which is we were moving the cube along the y-axis by 12 meters. Now let's say instead of moving the cube from this position to this particular position, I want to move this cube from this position to this particular position. That is negative 12 meters. So up till now, I was moving the cube by positive 12 meters on the right hand side. So if I want to move the cube to the left hand side, which means I need to move it by negative 12 meters. So how do you do that? So you do that by first of all selecting the keyframe, right? So this value is 12 meters, right? You can see this is the 10 and this is 11, this is 12. So at 12 meters, I have this particular keyframe and I need to actually move it to somewhere around here because this is negative 12. And what that will do is once I move this keyframe from this position to this particular position, this cube, instead of moving on the right hand side by 12 meters, will move on the left hand side by minus 12 meters, right? Basically, it will move on the left hand side by 12 meters, but in value terms, we are saying it is minus 12. So let's see how you can do that. So first of all, you need to select the keyframe. Now you need to grab it by pressing the letter G. And now you need to activate the y-axis. So press the letter Y on the keyboard and now move the keyframe downwards like this. And move it by negative 12 meters. And once you're satisfied, simply press enter on the keyboard. And that's it. And so now if I actually play this entire animation for you, so as you can see, this time the cube, instead of moving on the right hand side by 12 meters, is moving on the left hand side by 12 meters. And that's because I changed the value from 12 to minus 12 in the location y-axis. So I know it might sound complicated, it might look complicated, you might be confused, but please go through what I did in this video again and again and you will understand the logic behind it. So just to summarize the difference between the timeline, dope sheet and graph editor. In the timeline, you can just adjust the timing of your animation. When you move a keyframe in timeline, you are basically moving all the axis keyframes. In dope sheet, you can adjust the timing of your animation, but unlike the timeline, in dope sheet, you get the option to move transform action specific, axis specific keyframe. And in the graph editor, you get to adjust the timing of your animation, as well as you also get to adjust the values inside your transform action. So this was the fundamental difference between timeline, dope sheet and graph editor. I hope you understood the difference between them. It may sound complicated, but it is not actually. Just go through the video a couple of times and you will get the logic behind it. So that's it, guys. I hope you understood the difference between all the three motion editors. Do let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will again see you in the next video. Till then, thanks for watching.